Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And any of you at the last session will have heard a brief discussion about the question of housing and density. What are the requirements in ever-expanding populations, not just in Singapore, but in most cities across the world? How do we deal with forecasts which become almost out of date once they're made? I think I'm right in saying that the forecast in 2000 of Singapore's anticipated population growth across the course of this century had already been met by the 50th anniversary of independence in 2015. How do plans evolve? Well, to talk about approaches and strategies, where do we go from here? I'm delighted to welcome Cheng a veteran architect, if he doesn't mind me calling him that, of the Singapore architectural community, from Arc Urban Architects and Planners. Please welcome Cheng Siong Tan.
Well, I suppose it's still good morning, and welcome to this session. I'm trying to do my best to do what I should be doing. Well, this is a festival of architecture, although I will be dealing a big portion of it under the concepts of architecture and planning, which is something not new, but however, it's very relevant as we go into the 21st century. I mean, after 60, 70 years of free development and new nations and new world, we had done something that we are very proud of, and Singapore is a good example of what we can be proud of, but there are also many questions that I find troublesome. So I have a kind of love-hate relationship for Singapore's planning and architecture. I started as early as Singapore started. Singapore started in '65. I started my architectural practice in about that time, and then and grew to understand that there are urban issues that's more than architecture, and I became a planner as well. So I'm now known as an architect planner. So I'm going to discuss with you the subject of density, which can be very boring, because I mean, you just keep getting denser and denser. But how to make it more interesting, and indeed it is necessary to do something about density for the future. We are getting so busy, we are getting so dense, we are getting so congested. And of course, we try to use architecture to pretty it up. But I don't think that's enough. We should do more. And there are a lot of things that we can do. And I'd like to share with you what I think Singapore has done and what it ought to be doing into the future. Now, oh yes, I'm going to. Yes, now this today's presentation, I have a workout content in 3 parts. The first part is about the synopsis, about what this whole thing is all about, that I'm going to talk. And then I try to bring about an idea of a super connectors in the central part of my presentation. And of course, the third part is only the conclusion to highlight the importance of this issue. So, now, yes, there are 6 superconnectors typology that I will share with you, because superconnectors is part and parcel of the new urban scenery of the future, if not presently already happening. However, I shall do it the best I can. Now, under hypnosis, I'd like to share with you that density is actually the new, is actually insufficient as a catalyst for the future. You cannot just keep on getting denser and denser. We started very simple, I suppose living in caves, human race, and then we find that, too a bit lonely, although we need to, the cavemen need to run away from tigers and snakes, so they live alone. Then settlement came about, and they begin to understand that density has indeed certain good things. And the settlements turned into villages, and villages became towns. And then some towns become cities, and the cities now conurbations, and things are getting congested. And unfortunately, the beautiful architecture that we have created, ending up, some of them, into ghost towns. Now, these are issues that will face the world because in the needs to house so many people, we try to do the best we can. But unfortunately, it is being dictated by forces which is outside the control of architects and planners. Although we hope we could do a better job, but we are being dictated to by other forces of urbanism. And I would like to share some of it with you. As you see in this picture, now, as I see in this picture, I have 6 pictures here in which I see density has given us fantastic architecture. And of course, in the entertainment world, you have the Sphere in Las Vegas, which is a wonderful creation. Then the idea of housing people in just one building or 2 buildings, hundreds or thousands of them, is also been experimented or mooted upon, just as the line, trying to house everything in one line, which I think is very strange. Then comes the cube, which is another idea about housing people in a very condensed and dense way. Singapore, of course, has got a different vision from the very beginning. We started with new towns, and that is something very unique about Singapore, which I think should be better known by our architectural fraternity and our planners at large, who understand why Singapore adopted so clearly the idea of new towns. And we built 27 new towns in a matter of 60 years. It's 27, and we have 4 million people living there now, living in 20 over new towns. So this is a form, a typology, and the urban type of creation that we believe is good for the future cities of the world even. However, I personally, although participated in the earlier part, in the later years, as is now, I'm beginning to have a question mark, big question mark about it. And I'd like to share it with you here to see. In fact, we need a very simple solution to make it into a better place to live in and to raise children and to look after old people as well as look after our businesses. And this is very important. It is the business world that is driving a lot of things. And nothing wrong. That's why we have a place like this, you know. The Marina Sands complex is such a beautiful thing to be in. So, however, few million people needing other things best to be addressed. And if we forget to address them, it's not a good thing. 600 million people in ASEAN, 600 million people in Europe, they are all looking for answers. Now, am I taking it too big, into too big an issue? Yes, I want to take it into a global issue because the globe has to sustain so many people. And if we forget that the fact density alone is not good enough, then I think we'll be making a big mistake and very difficult. These issues has raised so much problem that shall we say, the development community are making huge mistakes themselves. and then they end up with ghost towns. Towns which are empty, fantastic superstructures, fantastic buildings off the ground, but nobody can afford to live there for many reasons. Not because of money, but there are many, many issues. So this is part and parcel of my discussion this morning. Now let's look at Singapore. Now Singapore has got a track record of achievements in terms of using a small piece of land, very, very small, turn it into a nation, and then build enough to house so many people, and then further develop an economy that is, well, I suppose, I am very proud of it, and there are many friends all over the world do think we have done a great job. And I think we have done a great job, especially in the way we manage all our happenings. But there are still, of course, many things to be done. As I try to put it, we have done phase 1 very well. We cleared all the slums, we cleared all the squatters, we built housing, we built new towns. And then we built superstructures, high-rise and commercial edifices that to meet the needs of a growing world. And then we have a fantastic airport, we have a beautiful, going to be a beautiful harbor in the east, and then we have in the central a commercial world that everybody seems to like. And now this is the setting that we are in, and now we are ready for the third stage, in my view. So now let's see what I can share with you, the stage. Now let me start with Super Connector 1. Why I call it Super Connectors is because I think things are getting so big. If they're not well connected in a simple way, there's nothing we can grow from. It will become repeating, and they all become more and more congested, and they will, if it doesn't work, not only the building doesn't work and the infrastructure doesn't work, but if the people in there don't work, they are not happy with it, they cannot become happy with it, or they somehow get off the track. We started looking for a beautiful world to live in, and then we end up with some shambles, and that will be a shame. So this is the kind of issue, big issue that I'm talking about. Now, Singapore started, like all new countries, or maybe new cities even, that we built. We rely on density to survive. We built high-rise to meet density problem, because especially Singapore, there's so little piece of land, and we need to plan for so many people. So we have, in the first phase, straight away built super high-rise. And then the 3 examples that I show you now on the picture is these 3 buildings. These 3 buildings are super high-rise of Singapore, done many years ago. Of course, the last one is only done about 15 years ago. But the first one, which qualified to be super high-rise, is Pearl Bank. Pearl Bank was done by our company, and when I was a 30-year-old young architect, we started something different. And because we said, that's the way to go, we must build high, since we don't have enough land to accommodate so many people. Then we have People's Park, then we have the Pinnacles. Now, all these are isolated buildings, isolated architecture, beautiful things by themselves, but together, they have not performed a good job. So I'm proposing now, right now, proposing to link them up with a super connector. And that is the issue I'm trying to present today. How we can complete our work, so to speak. How the architects and planners complete the work by connecting all these wonderful, beautiful buildings with a connector that people can actually live in and actually benefit from the facilities that's given there. So I will call them Super Connector 1. Now this is Connector 1, and hopefully it will bring in more joy. Unfortunately, now here is where my love-hate of Singapore comes. Singapore was really open to ideals, open to import anything that can make us survive. Then we did a good job, and we did what we did. Unfortunately, systems came in and get the whole thing stuck somewhere. And I'm now trying to explain that we need to break that up. So I'm proposing in this super connector one, by linking these three architectural products, to make it into a place where people can come down to the ground. You don't live in super high rise all the time, you need to come down to the ground. And with more cars, more roads, more everything that on the ground, the man has lost his place on the ground. So they can't even walk properly, they can't even cycle properly, they can't even, meet properly on the ground, in the open air. So this is my concern, and I would like to propose that super connector be created. So this is one example, connector one. Then comes connector two. Now Singapore has many rivers, small ones, which is very good. They're not big ones like some of these huge rivers. We have little rivers which is very easy to cross, and we can build bridges to link up both sides. And I suggest that we should put riverfront housing. And this is never even thought about in Singapore, because we use our rivers as drains. We just build banks and banks along our rivers, and nobody can get to use the river. They become canals. They become drains for dirty water. So I think it's a mistake, and we should do something. I wouldn't call it a mistake. It's a phase one situation. Now the phase one, phase two, we need to increase our density in a different way, in a totally different way. And we should make use of the river banks of Singapore. There are 19, there are more. There are about 20-something, 30-something, as you shown in the red, as you saw in the, let me now. Am I wrong? Good. Now, sorry. Here is the connector number two that I was trying to explain. There are 20 over rivers, small ones, long ones, but only 19 of them are probably big enough, long enough to use for housing. Even just 19, we could house 500,000 people there. So Singapore keep on complaining about land scarcity, no land, no this, not that, not enough thing to build, so go high. Not necessary. So we have to look at things more holistically, fundamentally different from just building density to get higher value. Value don't come from densities alone anymore, especially for the cities of the future, where man must come down to the ground. And the tendency, however, is to go higher and higher. Now Singapore is talking about 50 stories for public housing, for low-cost housing. Now that kind of strategy, I think, is wrong. We should keep our people get closer to the ground, get the human beings closer to environment, closer to nature. And talking about nature, Singapore from the very beginning has got a policy called National Park. And we built, so many national parks in Singapore. But they are not really used to enhance life, but just to make it beautiful looking. That's not enough. I think as architects and planners, we want to see everything joined together to create an architectural environment that is conducive for better society, better family, and better human being. There are old people and young people, old people like me needs a different kind of space. I don't want to live 50-story high. I want to live nearer the ground where I can see my friends, where I can just walk down easily. So these are issues facing future cities. And if we don't understand that and don't make an issue out of it, then I think we are again missing the opportunity. We grasp the opportunity after the world freed itself of colonies, after Singapore became an independent nation. You must understand, the world went through so much stress and struggle. empires after empires, conquest after conquest, colonies after colony. The whole world were nearly became a colony of Europe. I mean, nothing wrong. Not a challenge to Europe, but those were the times. 1,000 years ago, that's what they know how to do. They only know how to conquer land and make places in the colonies. Now we must make beautiful settlements and beautiful cities. And that means, please look after the people on the ground. And that's my thesis. So now, this riverbank is now actually a drain. So I am suggesting to do something about it. And I'm suggesting this to the government. However, in fact, we have done something about the rivers, but we do it as a decoration, not as a place to live in, not to increase our livability. Again, the visual love for beautiful things alone has also sabotaged, you might use, I use a heavy word. It has actually sabotaged the potential of a piece of land with rivers. Okay, so much for the super connected 2. Then comes super connected 3. This is super connected 3. Now, this super connected 3 links all of us from the airport to the CBD. The airport is now shown in the red circle. And the central area, central region is where we are. So these are the 2 fantastic developments that is linked by a fantastic highway. That is where the issue comes, highway. The highway simply cuts the residents from the coast. And we have a park there. We spend millions of dollars in Singapore to create a park. And nobody can get there. Not say nobody. I mean, we have to struggle to get there. Because to cross this 8 kilometers long of wooded park, we only have just one underpass in Singapore. Now, this is the kind of thing that is an oversight, in my view. There are about 500,000 people living behind it inland, and they can't get to the coast because it's being cut off by the highways. So these issues are very major. Hence, I suggest that we turn this existing park into a super connector. And that's very simply done by just building 10 underpass from the inside to the outside. And then you will be able to serve 500,000 people to have a place to enjoy. For those who are Singaporean, are very quite familiar with this particular piece of property. And I use that place rather often and jog along there when I was a younger person. Of course, now I can't do the jogging so easily. However, these are the opportunities that's available. So super connected 2 can happen. I mean, super connected 3 can happen. Now comes something different, what I will call connector 4. Now, in this suggestion or proposal, I'd like to raise 3 places in the world, which I'm very proud of, and I'm sure is known to all of you. We have the New York Central Park, which is a huge super connector. Then we have Champs-Élysées, another super connector that makes Paris itself alive. These connectors have got this beautiful purpose. Then comes, of course, La Alhambra. La Alhambra is of Barcelona, we all know that. Now, these places were not intended for huge populations of the future. They were done a few hundred years ago. They were just places for the city and for a small population. And yet, they were built. How is it that we don't know how to build them nowadays? No excuse for that neglect, so to speak. Of course, Singapore is a place where the government is in full control of the land. Of course, China is one country that the government owns all the land. But of course, it's so big, they have a different kind of schemes, different kind of system to manage the land ownership. But Singapore is unique. Singapore, from the very beginning, the government says, look, there are not enough land, we cannot leave it to all ownership of private ownership. So they kept public housing under their control. And that's why we built 27 new towns, housing 4 million people. We only have 5 million plus, although we are intending to increase to 7 million. So these extra 2-3 million, where would they stay? Where would they live? How are we going to accommodate them? And don't talk about the future 2-3 million. What about the existing 4-5 million? How do they continue to find Singapore a livable place? That is the larger questions that I'd like to raise today. Now, I think we have wonderful examples that we can learn from. We have Central Park, we have Champs-Élysées, we have Champs-Élysées of Paris, and then we have l'Alhambra. All these places are people's places. Of course, they were like shopping centers too. Unfortunately, it is almost like our Orchard Road, but I'm not talking about Orchard Road. We have enough one Orchard Road. Like Paris, you can't have another Champs-Élysées, right? One is enough. So I'm talking about spaces and strips of connectors for people living in the new towns and people living in private housing. These people are composed of not active people like most professional people in the prime of their life. There are, in each of these new towns, there are young population, children going to school. Then you have the older people, retired, wanting to have a life of connectivity, of community, and so on and so on. So we've got to cater for them. Now, why I'm making this an issue, maybe to those who are not Singaporean, may not fully understand the challenges of these issues. Because if we don't know how to make our grounds and our cities ground useful for the people. At the moment, if you go back there, if you go and see, all the ground areas are covered by roads and covered by car parks, multi-story car parks. And then a lot of columns, because we do our building in high-rise, and then because you build on stilts. Once you stay on stilts, you can't see through the whole thing. Instead of looking at you have plenty of landscape to look at and people to look at, you have a lot of columns to look at. And that's not a very good, encouraging environment for what we are very proud of, called our public housing. So now, for Singapore, I'm suggesting Toa Payoh, the new town, which was built started 60 years ago. And then, of course, Ang Mo Kio was the second new town. It's getting older and already, but they are also being spruced up. But without taking care of the residents on their legs, on their foot, on the children and the older people. This is something that can be easily done, and therein comes the super connector. Okay, so the third one, of course, is Bukit Panjang. Now, I want to run quickly over to look at New York, of course. Look at New York and look at Champs-Élysées and look at l'Alhambra. These two wonderful connectors of the world, which you're all familiar with, have given us so much joy. And they've given New York, in fact, given New York life. In fact, New York was created 500 years ago, but the park came later because density already tell them, hey, you cannot have the whole thing, the whole island covered up with buildings only. So at that time, they created Central Park to relieve the meaning of living in intense city. And that's done at the time before the highways come, before the MRT came. They were just talking about people on foot. Now, all these things are changing and changing and changing, and being dominated, all the future cities are dominated by MRTs, fast roads, express roads, and then, of course, high-rise building. You go to China, and you will be scared. You'll be frightened by some of the things they do and some of the things that happen if they do not have enough connectors for the people on the ground. So I'm now seriously proposing this to happen. Now, let's go to the next one. Now, I have suggested 3 places. One in three new towns of Singapore. These are public housing. This is government housing. And there are 4 million people staying there. And every day, apparently, every day, the MRT, now we got one of the biggest MRT systems for a small island in terms of station density per square kilometer. I think we have the highest. That means we intend to travel by MRT because we said don't own so many cars. We just don't have the land enough to build roads. So don't own any car. And hence the government imposed high penalty for owning a car. The cars in Singapore is 3 times maybe that of China. I don't know, maybe double that of Europe. Maybe 2.5 times that of America. Because America could afford to build roads. We just cannot afford to build roads anymore. Hence, it is important that we control the car population. But while controlling the car population very cleverly or very well, let's control the grounds for the people, the 4 million people who actually are using the MRT. They're using, 3 million people seem to be using our MRT system daily. 3 million. Now, that means they got to come down from their apartment, walk to the station, and then walk home. And those time and visual impact that they receive daily must be made much, much better so that Singapore will become a much, much better city in its 3rd phase. Now, why I am so taken up to this issue is that we have done very well phase 1. We cleared slums, we cleared squatters. So we cleaned up Singapore. Then we built high-rise, 2nd phase, and super infrastructures. Now comes the 3rd phase, where I think the man must be the center of attention and of goodness. And I think we can do it because we have got so many MRTs, we've got so many new towns, we just connect them nicely for the people to use on foot or with bicycles. We are not lack of program to make Singapore a beautiful city. Now, I'm very critical about some of the forgetfulness, but I am very proud of the good things that have been done. However, they must not forget. But I forgive Singapore for forgetting it in the phase 1 and phase 2. But the 3rd phase cannot be complacent. Once we become complacent in the 3rd phase, then I think Singapore, like any other city, will go down. I'm sure there are cities has gone down. I mean, with due respect, things grow old. Things need to be propped up, needs to be really, really supported with the right vision. And I think Singapore, in a strange way, is small enough. It's small enough to illustrate this possibility. And we have done it in phase 1 and phase 2. And we have done so much wonderful things, which if we do not continue, then I think people may desert. There are a lot of young people now in Singapore, young citizens. They are rich. Oh yes, the property values and all that has made their family rich, and then the family will pass the money to them. Then they don't know what to do next. There is no cultural emphasis. There is no creative emphasis in our way of life. And that is my point. If we continue to live purely on the material aspect of it, then I think ultimately the city will suffer and they will become slums again, so to speak. I mean, of course, forgive me for being negative in this issue. However, I don't think I am being crazy taking issues on such matters, because there are 3 million people using MRT, there are so many million people going to their neighborhood centers, blah, 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 blah. So many activities are done on the ground which are not really looked after in a manner, except planting trees. Oh, greening the roads. Those are good things, but we need more and more. And we can afford to do it. Not that we can't. The wonderful thing is that it can be done. Okay, now let's look at connector number 5. In connector number 5, I'm proposing all the new towns to have super connectors. And each one should have at least 3 super connectors, all each one adding to 3 kilometer long. 3 kilometer, one on average 1 kilometer long, and then 3 of them, and all connecting up the MRT stations, so that people can use it and very comfortably go to MRT stations and go in their daily ways, and then the new towns become a place where they can develop their identity, their neighborhoods, and their communities, which is not well looked after. We had, of course, in the beginning, don't get wrong, in the very beginning, the first phase, we built community centers. We built, so many neighborhood support. But as we grew richer, Singaporeans, all people like that, has become richer, has become more independent. They're able to be more active elsewhere. They don't have to rely on community centers. And as a result, those community centers got closed down in phase 2. Why? Because for lack of interest, and the young people are moving out to elsewhere. And more important, some of them even migrating. Now, this is not a very good story to tell, but the facts of life is there. And if we don't address that properly, it will deteriorate. Anyway, with due respect to all of architects here and planners here, infrastructures decay, they break down, they need repair. They grow older faster than human beings, so to speak, because the human being got the brain to keep them young. Excuse me, like myself, I'm being kept young by all these thoughts of possibilities. So I'm trying to say that buildings and infrastructures and cities grow old very quickly. You look at Detroit, apparently, in America, the industry went out just like that because China offered much cheaper factories for the investors to invest in. So everybody, investors left out, and then the workers are left without jobs. So these economic factors are part and parcel of the growth of cities and urbanization and urbanism. And the world, whether we like it or not, must urbanize and urbanize intelligently. And these superstructures has a role, definitely a role. Density had its role. That's why I like the subject. When I was asked to do something about the subject, I said, what a boring subject, density. What for? Then I'm beginning to understand that, density could be, when we live in cave, we had no density. Then we beginning to evolve into new towns, and density become a big factor that generated growth. Then it went further. It went to a point when it beginning to decay. And that is something that we must quickly correct for the next phase of our urbanization, and in fact, our globalization, if you might say. Having said that, what is the solution? It's actually not that difficult, but Singapore is unique. Singapore can do it just like that, because we got 20, 30 new towns, all under the control of the government. Now this is important. China, impossible. All under the control of developers. And developers do not have social and responsibility, so to speak. They only have responsibility to their shareholders. So these are the issues facing the world when we urbanize further and further and further. and then end up having more and more ghost towns. And that is the fighting. The ghost town not only in China, in Mexico, you have no ghost town already. There's so many struggling new countries coming up. They followed Singapore, they followed China, and then they end up with a lot of ghost towns. So these are facts of things happening and growing in the world. And we architects and planners can do a bit of suggestions here and there to make it work better. So Singapore, I think, is not a difficult thing to achieve. All the infrastructure, but man on the ground was left out, is my feeling. Then the next one, we need to carry the city. The city has been carrying us very well, making us richer, making us happier, making us enjoy so many things. The city has done its good work, but the city now needs help. Can't do it. We can't just depend on the city to build higher and higher and higher and forget to take care of the man on the ground. These are just very simple thinking, which I think once we get into it, we will see a lot of solutions. And the cities needs, there are cities dying, finishing already.
Yeah.
Okay.
We really need to finish now because I want to ask you one question while we have the opportunity, which is, do you feel optimistic that it will be possible to achieve what you envisage?
What?
Do you feel optimistic that it will be possible to make your superconnectors in Singapore? Do you think we can do this?
In Singapore?
Yeah.
Of course. Yes. Okay. Now that it's put, okay, that's very good. Thank you, Paul. Because all our new towns are owned by government. Now, this is very important. We are more communists than the communists, so to speak. We are not communists, we are open, but the landlord is the government, and they hold all the decisions. And they have a huge infrastructure of manpower to do all these things. Very simple, all that they need to do. In fact, I'm going to write to the government straight away to tell them, to show them this proposal, and then I'm going to get a group of friends to propose layouts to show them how it can be done.
I'm going to draw things to a close now because our time is up. Thank you for a polemic and a heartfelt plea for a reversion to the ground. And I think it's universally accepted that the idea of the vertical city has a profound implication for what happens at the base, not what happens 50 stories up. And actually, I think the problems you've identified, for example, the walking route, which is interrupted by the surface car park and the columns of existing buildings. So yes, you can walk it, but it's not a pleasant walk and it's not an agreeable walk. And in particular, that question of how do you cut the coast for people who are less able? Why is that cut off? Why aren't there underpasses or overpasses or streets which allow complete connection for all citizens to all amenities and facilities? And I think these are very, very big questions, not just in Singapore but elsewhere. But as you say, ownership of the land is absolutely crucial.
Yes.
And therefore it may be that the possibilities of this third phase of Singapore's development reverting to the idea of improving the ground plane in the same spirit that the cleanup happened and the high-rise happened. Yes. Cheng Song Tian, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.